World War II ended in 1945. Nations signed peace treaties, armies laid down their weapons, but one man never got the message. Deep in the jungles of the Philippines, he refused to believe the war was over. Cut off from the outside world, convinced that every sign of peace was enemy propaganda, he stayed hidden, carrying out missions, dodging search parties, and surviving alone for nearly 30 years. While the world moved on, he remained trapped in a battle that had long since ended. This is the unbelievable true story of Hiroo Onoda. Born on March 19, 1922 in Wakayama Prefecture, Japan, Hiroo Onoda grew up in a country rapidly transforming into a military empire. Raised in a traditional household, he was steeped in the values of Bushido, the samurai code emphasizing loyalty, sacrifice, and honor unto death. As Japan's imperial ambitions expanded throughout Asia, this code was militarized and injected into education, popular culture, and government propaganda. Children were taught to see death for the emperor as noble and surrender as the ultimate disgrace. In 1942, at the age of 20, Onoda was drafted into the Imperial Japanese Army. Because of his aptitude, he was selected for training at the Nakano School, Japan's top military intelligence academy. There, he was taught guerrilla warfare, sabotage, jungle survival, psychological operations, and most importantly, uncompromising loyalty. One directive was repeated like scripture: never surrender. Soldiers were warned that enemy propaganda would try to deceive them, and if captured, they were expected to die rather than disgrace their uniform or homeland. This rigid mindset would later trap Onoda in a war that had already ended, because to him, orders were sacred. In December 1944, Japan's military position was collapsing. The Allies had landed in the Philippines and were rapidly retaking territory. Onoda, by then a second lieutenant, was deployed to Lubang Island, west of Manila. His orders were specific: destroy the airstrip and harbor facilities to prevent Allied use, gather intelligence, conduct guerrilla attacks, and under no circumstances surrender or take his own life. He was to continue fighting until relieved by a superior officer. However, Onoda's orders were ignored by the commanding officers already stationed on the island, who refused to allow him full operational control. The mission failed almost immediately. Within weeks, American and Filipino forces overran Lubang. Most Japanese soldiers were either killed or surrendered. Onoda, along with 3 others, fled into the mountains. From there, they began their self-imposed exile. What they believed would be a short-term tactical withdrawal became a decades-long ordeal of survival, suspicion, and psychological warfare against the outside world. For nearly 3 decades, Onoda and his companions remained hidden in the jungle, continuing their mission as if the war had never ended. They constructed huts from bamboo and palm leaves, used captured or stolen tools, and hunted wild animals. They stole rice, salt, and clothing from nearby villages, believing it was part of their wartime mission to weaken the enemy. The jungle became both fortress and prison, a place where they were free to live by the code they had been taught, yet totally disconnected from reality. Onoda's strict military hierarchy remained intact. He continued to act as commanding officer, conducted training exercises and inspections. They patrolled, kept watch, and wrote reports in notebooks. For decades, Onoda kept his Arisaka Type 99 rifle clean, well-oiled, and ready for combat. To him, his mission was still active. The war was ongoing until he received official orders to the contrary. Psychologically, the isolation deepened their delusions. They viewed every villager as a potential spy or enemy combatant. They interpreted leaflets and news as enemy propaganda. In 1945, American planes dropped thousands of pamphlets announcing Japan's surrender. Onoda read them and declared them fake. Later, family members recorded messages and sent photographs. Onoda dismissed these as tricks too. As the years passed, the group gradually fell apart. In 1949, one member surrendered to local authorities, no longer able to bear the pressure of their isolated existence. Onoda saw this as a betrayal. Another was killed in a shootout with search parties in 1954, a loss that deeply affected Onoda, but he still refused to give in. Then, in 1972, the last remaining companion was shot and killed while the two were burning a farmer's rice field, believing it was still a legitimate military target. Onoda was now alone. He spent the next 2 years in complete isolation, surviving in silence, sleeping in caves or abandoned huts, and occasionally risking raids to steal food. Yet even then, his behavior didn't change. He continued to scout, gather intelligence, and await reinforcements that would never arrive. During this time, Onoda's presence became legendary. Locals feared the mountain man who emerged in the night, burned crops, and fired warning shots. The Philippine government presumed he was either dead or hallucinating. Japan, having undergone a radical transformation into a pacifist democratic state, had moved on, but Onoda had not. The extraordinary breakthrough came not from the military, diplomats, or search parties, but from a young Japanese college dropout and adventurer named Norio Suzuki. Disillusioned with the rigid expectations of Japanese society and yearning for adventure beyond the confines of modern urban life, Suzuki left Japan in search of meaning. He reportedly told friends he was going to look for, in his own words, Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman, in that order. While it sounded eccentric or even absurd to some, Suzuki was serious. He believed that only by chasing the improbable could he find meaning, and the first step was locating the man who had refused to come home from World War II. In 1974, after arriving on Lubang Island with nothing more than a backpack, a camera, and an unshakable belief that he could succeed, where military search parties had failed, Suzuki ventured into the dense jungle. Remarkably, within just 4 days of searching, he came face to face with the myth himself, Hiroo Onoda, dressed in a tattered uniform, rifle in hand, still alert and suspicious. Onoda, now 52 years old and visibly aged, listened with curiosity, but he remained skeptical. He explained again he could not surrender without direct orders from his superior officer. Suzuki returned to Japan with the news, and the government responded by locating Major Taniguchi, now working as a bookseller. On March 9, 1974, Taniguchi flew to Lubang and formally relieved Onoda of duty. Standing in full dress uniform, the former major declared, "You are released from your military service." Only then did Onoda lower his weapon. He emerged from the jungle in tattered uniform, his rifle still operational, 500 rounds of ammunition, a ceremonial sword from his father, and a dagger meant for suicide unused. The war for him was finally over. Onoda's return to Japan triggered a national sensation. For some, he was a symbol of unshakable loyalty and stoic endurance. Prime Minister Eisaku Sato praised his devotion. Others were disturbed by the killings committed during his jungle campaign. At least 30 Filipino villagers and police officers had died over the years. While President Ferdinand Marcos granted him a pardon, public opinion was divided. Onoda too struggled with reintegration. Japan in 1974 was totally unrecognizable from the empire he had once sworn to protect. The militarist ethos had been replaced by pacifism, Western capitalism, and rapid modernization. The values he had lived by seemed irrelevant, even mocked. Unable to adjust, Onoda moved to Brazil, where he became a cattle rancher. He eventually returned to Japan in the 1980s and opened the Onoda Nature School, where he taught wilderness survival, discipline, and resilience. Though he maintained his pride in having followed orders, he also expressed sadness that so much of his life had been lost to a war that was already over. He died in 2014 at the age of 91. Alright, that's gonna be the end of it. This time, I promise y'all, I'll be posting these types of videos every week on YouTube. So stay tuned and I'll see you next time.